Her waitress is about to get fired for giving food to hungry twin girls, but a billionaire approaches and sees it all. What he does next surprises everyone. The clock hands showed it was almost 10 at night when the bell above the door of the Magnolia Diner jingled. The sound cut through the murmur of conversation and the clinking of silverware, bringing with it a draft of cold air that made Sarah Miller shiver. She adjusted her faded yellow apron and moved between the tables with the coffee pot, refilling cups and offering tired but genuine smiles. Having worked at the same diner in the town of Oak Ridge for 4 years, 42-year-old Sarah knew every scratch on the Formica tables and every crack in the tiled floor. It was a modest place, with a simple menu and affordable prices, frequented by local workers and middle-class families. Nothing glamorous but honest, like she was herself. The sound of the bell automatically made her turn toward the entrance, where the November night's chill formed a mist that fogged up the windows. For a moment, she saw no one. Then she looked down. Standing in the doorway, like two small ghosts, were 2 girls, identical twins. No older than 8 or 9, Diane, with tangled brown hair and wearing clothes far too thin for that temperature. Their pale faces seemed like perfect duplicates, same large eyes, same hollow cheeks, same expression of having seen more of life than children ever should. "Table for 2, Sarah asked instinctively, even noticing that no adult was with them. The twins did not answer. They just stepped forward a few paces, their eyes fixed on the plates passing by on trays. One of them swallowed hard when a plate of pancakes went by less than a yard away. Sarah felt a lump form in her throat. In her years as a waitress, she had seen all kinds of customers, but something about these children, the way their eyes followed the food, struck a deep chord inside her. "Are you hungry?" she asked, crouching down to their eye level. The girl on the right, with a small tear in the sleeve of her thin coat, nodded almost imperceptibly. The other kept her gaze down, as if admitting hunger was something forbidden. "Where are your parents?" Sarah asked, softening her voice even more. "We don't have any," the one on the left replied, so quietly Sarah almost didn't hear. That was enough. Sarah straightened up and looked at the clock. Mr. Coleman, the diner's owner, was busy at the cash register. The girls clearly had no money, and she knew her boss would never allow them to be fed for free. He had refused to help homeless people in the past, saying, "This isn't a charity." But Sarah also knew what it was like to go hungry. At 17, when she ran away from home to escape an abusive stepfather, she slept on park benches and begged for leftovers at restaurants until a kind older woman took her in and gave her a chance as a kitchen helper. That helping hand had changed her life. "Come with me," she said, guiding the girls to a table in the back, out of Mr. Coleman's line of sight. "Stay here, okay? I'll bring you something." In the kitchen, Sarah watched the chef preparing a plate of roast beef with mashed potatoes. She waited until he got distracted with another order and quickly put together 2 plates, adding an extra helping of vegetables. It wouldn't be waste. These were leftovers likely to be tossed out at the end of the night anyway. Carefully carrying the plates, Sarah returned to the table where the twins waited, as still as statues. "Here you go," she said, placing the steaming plates in front of them. "Careful, it's hot." For a moment, the girls didn't move, as if they couldn't believe what they were seeing. Then, almost simultaneously, they picked up their utensils and began to eat. Not with the ravenous speed Sarah expected, but with a meticulous restraint, as if they feared the food might vanish if they ate too fast. "What are your names?" Sarah asked as they ate. The girl with the tear in her sleeve swallowed a bite of potato before answering. "I'm Emma. She's Lily." "Emma and Lily," Sarah repeated, smiling. "Beautiful names." "I'm Sarah." A faint smile crossed Lily's lips as she carefully cut a piece of meat. It was the first sign of emotion Sarah had seen from either of them. "Where are you sleeping?" Sarah asked, keeping her voice low. Emma shrugged. "We don't know yet for tonight." Sarah's heart tightened. No child should ever have to answer a question like that. She was about to ask more when a shadow fell across the table. "What's this, Miller?" The harsh voice of Mr. Coleman sliced through the air like a cold blade. Tall, heavy-set, with a thick mustache that moved when he spoke. He was known for being tough on employees and obsessed with profits. Sarah stood up, instinctively placing herself between the girls and her boss. "Mr. Coleman, these girls were hungry. It's just leftovers that would have been thrown away." "Leftovers? I don't see any label marking those plates as leftovers," he interrupted, his face turning red. "All I see is food that costs money. My money." An awkward silence fell over the diner. Conversations at other tables ceased, and all eyes turned to the scene unfolding. Sarah felt her cheeks burn with shame, but she stayed firm. "I'll pay for the plates," she said, knowing it would likely eat up almost her entire day's wage. "But I couldn't let them go hungry." Mr. Coleman looked at the girls with disdain, then turned back to Sarah. "Pay? With what? The money I pay you?" "That's practically theft." In a far corner of the diner, a man lowered his newspaper, watching the scene with interest. Ethan Hayes had chosen the Magnolia Diner precisely for its anonymity. Dressed in a simple grey sweater and dark pants, no one would suspect he owned one of the largest hotel chains in the country. At 38, Ethan preferred to observe everyday life from a distance, avoiding the attention his fortune inevitably brought. He was in town to negotiate the purchase of a local hotel and had chosen this unassuming place for dinner instead of the upscale restaurants where he was usually recognized. Now, with his newspaper down, he watched with a curiosity he hadn't felt in a long time. A middle-aged waitress defending two children against the hefty man who was clearly the owner, almost a cinematic scene in its moral simplicity. "Mr. Coleman," Sarah tried to maintain composure, "they're just two hungry kids. What would you do if you were in my place?" "What would I do?" he snapped, his voice rising. "I'd send them away. This is a business, not a soup kitchen." His cruel words hung in the air like toxic smoke. Sarah felt her stomach twist with anger, but kept her voice steady as she replied, "They're children, Mr. Coleman, children. So what? They're not my kids or yours. If every hungry person who walks in gets free food, I'll be bankrupt within a week." From his corner, Ethan kept observing, his analytical gaze picking up details others might miss. The waitress's protective stance, the almost imperceptible tremor in the girl's hands, the cheap wedding ring on the waitress's finger, worn from years of use, the gold pin on the owner's chest, indicating membership in some local elite club. A familiar story was unfolding before him, power versus compassion, rules versus empathy. In his world of spreadsheets and board meetings, such conflicts were abstract, resolved by cost-benefit analyses. But here, in this simple diner, he witnessed the human impact of decisions. "You're fired," Mr. Coleman suddenly declared, pointing a stubby finger at Sarah. "Gather your things and get out." The entire diner seemed to hold its breath collectively. A woman at a nearby table dropped her fork, which clattered on the ceramic floor. Sarah blinked several times, as if trying to process the words. "Fired. For feeding hungry children. For theft," he corrected, with a vindictive smile. "Giving away food without permission is theft. And don't think you'll get your paycheck this week." The girls, Emma and Lily, had stopped eating, their wide eyes fixed on the scene as if they were already used to causing trouble for adults who tried to help them. Ethan Hayes carefully folded his newspaper and set it on the table. Something inside him, an almost forgotten sensation, began to burn slowly. It was outrage, he realized, a feeling that had long been replaced by the cold rationality of business. "I don't deserve this," Sarah said, her voice trembling. "I've worked here for 4 years. I was never late, never absent. You should have thought of that before giving away free food. Now get out of my sight before I call the police." Mr. Coleman crossed his arms over his broad chest, like a judge delivering a final sentence. Sarah looked at the girls, who now watched with guilty expressions. "It's not your fault," she whispered to them. Then, turning to the rest of the diner, she added, "Sorry for the inconvenience." With dignity, she untied her apron and folded it carefully, placing it on the counter. Some customers looked away, ashamed they weren't intervening. Others glared disapprovingly at Mr. Coleman. Ethan watched as the waitress took her worn purse from under the counter and walked toward the door. Her head held high despite her visibly tense shoulders. The girls exchanged identical worried looks and started to get up. That was when Ethan did something that even surprised him. He stood up and, with firm steps, approached the table where the twins sat. "Mr. Coleman," he called out, his voice calm but penetrating. The diner's owner turned, ready to unload his anger on someone else, but hesitated when he saw Ethan. Something in his posture suggested authority. "What do you want?" he asked, less aggressive than he had been with Sarah, but still hostile. "I'd like to pay for these children's meal," Ethan said, taking a $100 bill out of his wallet, "and also for the next meal they might need." Mr. Coleman looked at the bill, then at Ethan, confused by this twist. His anger gave way to greed as he extended his hand to grab the money. "Well, that changes things, I suppose." "No," Ethan said, holding the bill out of the man's reach. "Actually, it doesn't. It just shows the hypocrisy of the situation. The food has the exact same value, whether I pay for it or the waitress you just fired unfairly." A flush crept up Mr. Coleman's neck. "Listen, I don't know who you think you are, but this is my establishment. An establishment that depends on the community to survive," Ethan interrupted, glancing around at the customers now watching the scene with renewed interest. "I wonder how many of them will return after seeing how you treat loyal employees and hungry children." At the door, Sarah had stopped, turning back to watch the unexpected confrontation. The girls remained seated, their eyes darting between Ethan and Mr. Coleman like spectators at a tennis match. "Is that a threat?" the owner demanded, his face now completely red. "It's an observation," Ethan replied calmly. "Business depends on reputation, and you've just severely damaged yours." Indeed, murmurs of disapproval were spreading among the tables. An elderly couple had already asked for their check, shaking their heads in disgust. Mr. Coleman looked around, suddenly realizing he had become the villain of the story. Swallowing hard, he tried to salvage the situation. "Look, maybe I was a bit harsh," he said, trying to sound reasonable, "but rules are rules." "Your rules," Ethan said, "not laws of nature." He turned to Sarah, who was watching from the door. "Ma'am, could you come back here for a moment?" Sarah hesitated, then slowly returned, curious about the stranger who had intervened on her behalf. "My name is Ethan Hayes," he said, extending his hand. "And I think you deserve not only to keep your job but also an apology." Sarah shook his hand, noting the firm grip and the contrast between her calloused skin from years of work and his gi, clearly belonging to someone who didn't do manual labor. "Sarah Miller," she replied, "but I don't need charity, sir." "It's not charity to acknowledge decency," Ethan said, turning to Mr. Coleman, man. So, cornered by public opinion and intimidated by Ethan's presence, the diner's owner partially relented. "Fine, Miller. You can stay. But it'll come out of your paycheck," he grumbled, pointing at the girls' plates. "Actually," Ethan intervened again, "this meal is on me." He placed the $100 bill into Mr. Coleman's hand. "Keep the change." The man looked at the bill, then at Ethan, started to protest but thought better of it and walked away, muttering something about meddlers. Conversations slowly resumed in the diner, although many eyes remained on the table where Ethan now sat with the twins, Sarah still standing nearby. "Why did you do that?" Sarah asked, genuinely puzzled. Ethan studied her tired yet proud face, the question echoing in his mind. Why, indeed? For years, he had observed injustices from the comfort of his privileged world without feeling the need to intervene. What was different this time? "Because it was the right thing to do," he finally replied, realizing the profound simplicity of that truth. "Now, why did you risk your job for them?" Sarah looked at the girls, who had quietly resumed eating, as if afraid the meal could be taken away at any moment. "Because no one deserves to go hungry," she answered simply. "Especially children." Ethan nodded, feeling a growing respect for this ordinary woman who had shown more moral courage in a single moment than he had in years of business triumphs. "Do you have anywhere to go?" he asked the girls. Emma and Lily exchanged looks, that silent communication only twins seemed to share. Lily spoke this time. "Sometimes we stay at St. Matthew's shelter, but it closes early tonight." "What about your parents?" Ethan gently pressed. "Mom died last year," Emma replied, lowering her eyes to her plate. "Dad, we don't know where he is." Sarah felt her heart clench. She'd come from a broken home, But at least she'd had a roof over her head as a child, dysfunctional as it was. "Child Protective Services," she asked Ethan in a low voice. "They'd separate us," Lily immediately interjected, having overheard. Her tone suggested it was her biggest fear. "They always say it's easier to find homes for one child rather than two." Ethan studied the girls more intently. Beneath the layer of grime and worn clothes, he noticed delicate features, intelligence in their eyes. Children who, in different circumstances, could be safe in a comfortable home, worried only about homework and friends. A disturbing thought struck him. These twins could easily have been the daughters he never had, if fate had turned out differently. In the insulated life he led, it was easy to forget that misery existed just a few blocks away from his luxury hotels. Meanwhile, Sarah watched Ethan with growing curiosity. His clothes were simple but high quality. His watch was discreet but clearly expensive to a trained eye. There was an aura of natural authority about him, not the petulant kind shown by Mr. Coleman, but something deeper, the type of confidence that comes from never worrying about finances. "Mr. Hayes," she said, testing the unfamiliar name, "thank you for your help, but I need to get back to work now." Ethan glanced at Mr. Coleman, who was casting furious glances from the cash register. "Are you sure you want to stay here?" "After what happened," Sarah shrugged, a gesture carrying years of resignation. "I have to pay the rent, and it's not easy finding another job at my age." Ethan felt that indignation flare again. For him, changing careers or cities was a simple logistical decision. For people like Sarah, it was a matter of survival. "What if I offered you a better job?" he asked impulsively. Sarah laughed, a brief tired sound. "You don't even know me, sir." "I know enough," Ethan replied. "I saw how you treated these children. I saw your integrity. That tells me more about your character than any resume could." "What kind of job?" Sarah asked, her natural skepticism competing with a spark of hope. "I own the Grand Oak Ridge Hotel. We're always looking for reliable people in the main restaurant." Sarah's eyes widened. The Grand Oak Ridge was the most luxurious hotel in town, frequented by executives and wealthy tourists. Tips from a single night, they were probably equal to a week's earnings at the Magnolia Diner. "Are you serious?" she asked, her voice betraying her disbelief. "Completely." Ethan took a business card from his pocket and handed it to her. "Call this number tomorrow and ask for the HR manager, Amanda Torres. I'll let her know to expect your call." Sarah took the card as if it were made of crystal, reading and rereading the embossed gold letters. "Ethan Hayes, I'm CEO, Hayes Hospitality Group." "You're just someone who recognizes value when he sees it," Ethan said, dodging the implied question about his wealth. He turned to the girls, who had finished eating and were watching the conversation with interest. "What about you two? Where will you sleep tonight?" Emma and Lily exchanged that silent look again. "We have places," Emma said vaguely. "Safe places," Ethan pressed, already knowing the answer before Lily looked away. In that moment, a decision crystallized in his mind, a decision that, in hindsight, seemed inevitable ever since he saw the girls enter the diner. Maybe it was crazy, maybe it was reckless, but he felt more certain about this than about many multi-million-dollar contracts he had signed. "I have a big house," he said, choosing his words carefully, "with empty guest rooms. You could stay there tonight while we figure out something more permanent." Sarah looked at him with alarm. "Mr. Hayes, with all due respect, that's impulsive? Risky?" Ethan finished and smiling slightly. "Probably, but I'd rather take that risk than know they're out on the street on a night like this." The twins watched the exchange with identical expressions of cautious hope, the look of those who have learned not to trust promises, but still haven't completely lost the ability to believe. "How do we know we can trust you?" Emma asked directly, surprising both Sarah and Ethan with her bluntness. "Good question," Ethan replied, genuinely impressed. "In fact, you don't, just like I don't know if I can trust you. But sometimes we have to give each other the benefit of the doubt." He took his phone from his pocket and offered it to Sarah. "Feel free to verify my identity. Call the police. Whatever you need to do to feel safe about this decision." Sarah took the phone hesitantly. Something about Ethan's demeanor, the way he had confronted Mr. Coleman, and the genuine concern in his eyes when he spoke to the girls, eased her initial suspicions. Still, years of surviving had taught her caution. "Why are you doing this?" she asked again, searching his face for any sign of ulterior motives. Ethan paused, the question echoing deeper than Sarah could imagine. Why? Indeed, he had enough resources to help hundreds of children through anonymous donations to institutions. Why get personally involved with these two? Because they're people, not statistics, he finally replied, and because maybe I need this as much as they do. Something in the honesty of that answer moved Sarah. She handed back the phone without making the call. "I believe you," she said simply. Then, turning to the twins, "What do you think?" "It's your decision." Emma and Lily once again engaged in that silent twin dialogue. "Can we bring our stuff?" Lily finally asked. "Your stuff," Ethan repeated. "We have a backpack," Emma explained, "hidden nearby with our important things." Sarah smiled, recognizing how crucial those few possessions must be for kids who had nothing else. "Of course you can," Ethan replied. "We can pick it up right now." As the girls got up with wary movements, like wild animals approaching offered food, Sarah lightly touched Ethan's arm. "I'll call tomorrow," she said, referring to the job. "And I'd like to know how they're doing." Ethan nodded, understanding that the bond formed tonight wasn't just between him and the twins. It included this woman who had risked everything to feed them. "I'll keep you updated," he promised. "And I look forward to your call." As they headed for the exit, the twins flanking Ethan like small shadows, Sarah watched them with a mixture of hope and apprehension. The doorbell jingled once more as they stepped into the cold night, closing one chapter and opening another in all their lives. Back at her station, ignoring the curious looks from customers and Mr. Coleman's sour expression, Sarah carefully put Ethan Hayes' card in her pocket. For the first time in years, she felt that tomorrow could be different, not just for the twins, but for herself as well. Outside, as Ethan and the girls disappeared into the night, the first snowflakes began to fall, covering the town with a white mantle that seemed somehow symbolic, as if nature itself were offering a new beginning for those three souls brought together by fate on a cold night at the Magnolia Diner. 3 weeks had passed since that night at the Magnolia Diner. The light flurries of snow had become a thick layer covering Ethan's gardens, like a pristine white blanket. Emma sat on the windowsill of the room, watching a bright red cardinal land on a snow-laden branch. The girls' fingers traced patterns on the fogged glass while Lily, lying on the canopy bed, flipped through an illustrated book about constellations. "Do you think it'll snow forever?" Emma asked, not taking her eyes off the wintry landscape. Lily looked up from her book. "Nothing lasts forever," she replied, with a practical wisdom that always seemed beyond her 9 years. The first few nights in Ethan's mansion had been strange. Used to sleeping in makeshift shelters, the twins couldn't relax in soft beds with clean blankets and fluffy pillows. On the first night, Ethan found them curled up on the floor, sharing a single blanket, even though there were 2 perfectly made beds in the room. "You can use the beds, and he said gently, after knocking on the door and finding them like that. "They're too soft," Emma explained, unashamed. "Feels like we'll sink in and disappear." Rather than insist, Ethan simply nodded. "I understand. Sleep wherever makes you comfortable. This is your home now." Home. A word the girls hadn't associated with any specific place for over a year. Since their mother, Claire, died of pneumonia from lack of proper treatment, they'd bounced between temporary shelters, acquaintances' houses, and, on the worst nights, train stations and parks. Gradually, they let their guard down. First, they accepted using the giant bathtub with unlimited hot water and plush towels that smelled like lavender. Then they started using the closet Ethan had quickly stocked with all sorts of new clothes, though at first they only took the bare necessities, as if afraid it might all be taken away at any moment. In the kitchen, Chef Isabelle, a stern-faced but soft-hearted French lady, had made it her personal mission to put some meat on their little bones. She watched with satisfaction as the portions the girls accepted gradually increased, though they still ate with careful restraint. never asking for more, always thanking for each meal as if it were a precious gift. "They're adjusting," Ethan remarked to Martin, his longtime butler and personal assistant, while watching the girls explore the library in the second week. Martin, a tall, slender man with impeccably combed grey hair, nodded with his usual discretion. "Children are surprisingly resilient, sir, though they still keep their backpacks near the bed every night." Ethan frowned. "As if they're ready to run at any moment." "Precisely, sir. Those backpacks were a symbol of their previous life, tattered, patched up, containing the only belongings they truly felt were theirs." Ethan was curious about their contents, but respected the girls' privacy, understanding that whatever was inside those bags represented the only constant in their uncertain lives. Meanwhile, across town, Sarah Miller adjusted the impeccably pressed black and white uniform, checking her reflection in the Grand Oak Ridge Hotel's locker room mirror. The contrast with the faded yellow apron from the Magnolia Diner could not have been greater. "You look great," said Gabriella, a younger waitress who had become her friend over the past few weeks. "Ready for lunch? The pharmaceutical conference executives arrive in 20 minutes. Sarah nodded, taking a deep breath to calm the nervousness she still felt, even after 3 weeks on the new job. The transition was not easy. The level of sophistication required in a 5-star restaurant made the Magnolia Diner seem like a school cafeteria. Details she never had to think about before, like which side to serve each dish from, when to replace utensils, which wine pairs best with each meal, were now an essential part of her work. But the tips, those were transformative. On a good night, she made what she would have in an entire week at the Magnolia. For the first time in years, she wasn't constantly calculating whether she would have enough money for rent and bills. "Any news about the girls?" Gabriella asked, while they organized linen napkins for service. Sarah smiled. She had shared the story of the twins with her colleague, though she withheld details about who Ethan Hayes really was. As far as Gabriella knew, he was just a successful businessman, not the owner of the hotel where they worked. "I talked to them on the phone yesterday. They seemed to be adjusting well." What Sarah didn't mention was the worry she felt. Not that she doubted Ethan's intentions. Something in his eyes conveyed a sincerity she rarely saw in wealthy people. But the whole situation was so unusual. A single, calm, extremely rich man suddenly taking in 2 homeless girls. What would happen when the novelty wore off? When inevitable complications arose? And the strangest part, why did she care so much? She had known the girls for only a few hours before Ethan took them. She had no real responsibility for them. Yet she thought about them constantly, called to check on them, and had even visited the mansion once on her day off, bringing homemade cookies she baked especially for them. The maître d' appeared at the locker room door. "Folks, the group is arriving. Everyone to your stations." Sarah put her thoughts aside for later. Now it was time to work. In the mansion's library, Ethan was seated in a leather armchair, observing Emma and Lily as they scanned the shelves. It was a strange feeling to see a house that had always seemed perfectly adequate for him alone, now revealing its inadequacies for children. The library, designed to impress adult guests with its collection of first editions and rare volumes, had very few children's books. "We can buy more books for you," he said, noticing how the girls looked curiously at the leather-bound tomes but hesitated to touch them. "These are very pretty," Lily replied politely. "Yes, but maybe not very fun for you." Ethan smiled. "What do you like to read?" The girls exchanged glances, that silent communication that seemed to precede every answer. "Mom used to read Harry Potter to us," Emma finally said. "We only had the first book, but she read it over and over." "Where is that book now?" Ethan asked gently. Emma bit her lip. "We had to leave almost everything behind when we moved out of our last apartment." Ethan felt a pang of sadness. A single book, read repeatedly, probably one of the few connections they had to their late mother, and they'd lost even that. "I think we can fix that," he said, making a mental note to buy the entire series. "Anything else you like to read?" "Books about space," Lily replied quickly. "Planets and stars." "And adventure stories," Emma added. The conversation continued, the girls gradually sharing more, their answers becoming less cautious, less calculated to please. Ethan realized he was witnessing a small miracle, their trust beginning to blossom, like delicate plants receiving sunlight after a long period of darkness. At night, after dinner, it became a ritual to sit in the living room. Ethan, who normally spent his evenings reviewing reports or in video conferences, now reserved that time exclusively for the girls. Sometimes they watched a movie, other times they played board games or just talked. One of those nights, while a snowstorm howled outside, Emma suddenly mentioned her backpack for the first time. "We can show you some things," she said abruptly, breaking the comfortable silence that had settled as the three watched the fireplace. Ethan raised his eyebrows, surprised by the spontaneous offer. "I'd really like that." The girls exchanged glances, and Lily nodded. "I'll go get it," Emma said, standing up and heading upstairs. While they waited, Lily explained, "There are important things, the ones we couldn't lose, no matter where we went." Emma returned, carrying the old purple backpack with patches. Sitting on the rug in front of the fireplace, she unzipped it carefully, as if opening a chest of treasures. "This is Mr. Buttons," she said, pulling out a worn teddy bear missing one eye, covered in visible stitches. "It was our first present. We've shared it since we were babies." Ethan smiled, touched by the simplicity and sentimental value of the toy. Next, Lily took out a broken music box. "It doesn't play anymore, but Mom said it belonged to her grandmother." One by one, they revealed their treasures. A seashell from the only day they remembered spending at the beach, a silver spoon their mother claimed had belonged to a wealthy family she once worked for, a cheap but shiny brooch, the last birthday gift they had received. Then, from the bottom of the backpack, Emma took out a crumpled envelope. "These are the only photos we have of Mom," she said, her voice slightly shaky. Lily moved closer to Ethan as Emma opened the envelope and took out half a dozen worn photographs. The first showed a young, beautiful woman with brown hair like the twins, smiling at the camera with a baby in each arm. "This is from when we were really little," Lily explained. The next photo showed the girls a bit older, maybe 4, with the same woman in a park. Ethan examined them with genuine interest, feeling privileged to glimpse the girl's past. "And this," Emma hesitated, handing over the last picture. "We don't know who this man is with Mom. She never talked about him." Ethan took the photograph, examining it casually. It showed the same woman, younger, smiling shyly beside a man with dark hair and a wide grin, his arm around her shoulders. Something about the setting looked familiar, a beach he recognized. Ethan's smile froze. His hands started to tremble slightly as he brought the photo closer, unable to believe what he was seeing. The man in the photo was his younger brother, David. David, who had disappeared after a terrible fight with the family nearly 10 years ago. David, who had rejected the Hayes family empire to find his own path. David, who occasionally sent rare emails from different parts of the country before stopping all communication about 5 years ago. The revelation hit Ethan like a physical blow. If the man in the picture with the girl's mother was indeed David, that meant Emma and Lily were his nieces. "Mr. Ethan, are you okay?" Lily's voice pulled him back to the present. Both girls were watching him with worried expressions. "Yes, He tried to steady his voice. Where was this photo taken? Do you know?" Emma shrugged. "Mom said it was before we were born. Somewhere called Cape Cod." Cape Cod, the Hayes family's summer house, the place David spent his last summer with them before the fight. Ethan felt the room spin slightly. Everything made sense now. The inexplicable connection he'd felt with the twins from the moment they walked into the diner. Something familiar in their smiles, in the way Lily tilted her head when she was pensive, just like David used to do. He looked at the girls, his nieces, with new eyes, now seeing the brother's features he had overlooked all along. The same eyes, the same face shape, even some mannerisms. "Do you recognize the man?" Lily asked, curious about his reaction. Ethan opened his mouth to answer, but no words came out. How to explain? What to say to two children who had already lost so much? That the stranger who took them in was actually their uncle. That the father they never knew was his missing brother. "He's someone who reminds me of someone," he finally managed to say, his voice sounding strange even to himself. Could I keep this photo for a while? The girls exchanged hesitant looks. I promise I'll give it back, Ethan added quickly. It's the only picture you have of him, whoever he is. Emma nodded slowly. Okay, but please be careful with it. It's the only photo we have of him, whoever he is. I'll guard it with my life, Ethan promised, feeling the weight of his words. It wasn't just a photograph that needed protecting now. It was a story, a legacy, and most importantly, the future of two girls who, without knowing it, had found their way back to a family they never knew they had. As the girls carefully packed their treasures back into the backpack, Ethan held the photograph, his mind racing with unanswered questions, theories, and possibilities. Where was David now? Why hadn't he returned to his daughters and their mother? Did he even know he was going to be a father? That night, after the twins went to bed, Ethan sat in his dark office, the photo of David and Claire illuminated only by his desk lamp. He picked up the phone and, after a moment of hesitation, dialed the number he'd called hundreds of times over the years, always with no answer. David's number. As expected, an automated message informed him the number was no longer in service. Ethan sighed, setting the phone back on the desk. "Where are you, brother?" he murmured to the photograph. "And why didn't you ever tell us about them?" Upstairs, the twins slept peacefully, finally at ease in their soft beds, unaware that their world was about to change again, this time with the revelation that the man who took them in was not a stranger after all. As the snow continued to fall outside, Ethan made a silent promise to his absent brother and the sleeping girls. He would find the truth, no matter the cost or how long it took, and more importantly, he would be the family they always deserved. The photograph remained on Ethan's desk like a newly embodied ghost. 3 days had passed since the night the girls showed him their treasures, and he still couldn't stop staring at the image of his brother, smiling beside Claire, the twins' mother, David Hayes, the younger brother, the family rebel. Ethan spun his office chair, gazing out at the city through the panoramic window. The constant snowfall made everything quieter, as if the entire world conspired to leave him alone with his thoughts. And those thoughts kept circling back to a single question: how to tell the girls. The phone rang, interrupting his contemplation. It was Martin, his assistant. "Sir, Investigator Ramirez is on the line." Ethan took a deep breath before answering. Hayes speaking. "Mr. Hayes, I have the preliminary information you requested." The investigator's deep voice sounded on the other end. "I confirm that Claire Bennett, the twins' mother, indeed met your brother in Cape Cod. She was working as a waitress at a restaurant near your family's summer house in the summer of 2014. Exactly as Ethan suspected. The last summer David spent with the family before the fight that tore them apart. Were you able to track David's movements after that?" "Partially," Ramirez replied. "He and Claire lived together for almost a year in Boston. Then they moved to Chicago, where the twins were born. I found records of an informal marriage ceremony, though it wasn't legally registered." Ethan felt a twinge in his chest. David had tried to build a family, something he'd never shown interest in when he was under their parents' suffocating expectations. What happened after that? Why wasn't he with them when Claire passed away? A brief pause. "I'm still investigating, but I found a police report from 2016. David was involved in a serious car accident. He was hospitalized but left before completing his treatment. After that, the trail gets harder to follow." "Could he be—" Ethan couldn't finish the sentence. "I found no death certificate, sir, if that's what you're asking," Ramirez replied, understanding the unspoken concern. "But he might have been using another name by then. I'll keep looking and send a detailed report this afternoon." After hanging up, Ethan remained still, absorbing the information. The pieces of the puzzle were coming together in a painful picture. David met Claire. They had an informal marriage. They had the twins. Then an accident. David vanished. Claire raised the girls alone until her death. What had happened to his brother? Could the accident have caused amnesia? Was he alive somewhere, unaware of his family? Or had he simply abandoned Claire and the twins, repeating the pattern of running away that had always been his response to hardship? A soft knock on the door broke his thoughts. Ethan quickly put the photograph away in a drawer. "Come in." The door opened to reveal Emma and Lily, already dressed for school. One of the first things Ethan had done was enroll them in a good private school, despite their initial fears about not fitting in. "We're ready," announced Emma, adjusting the new backpack on her shoulders. Strangely, both girls still insisted on bringing their old purple backpack to school every day, even though they had new ones, like they needed to keep that last link to their previous life. "We still haven't finished our math homework," Lily confessed, a slight blush in her cheeks. "We tried, Bay, but the fraction problems are hard." Ethan smiled, getting up. "We can work on it in the car. I'm sure you'll figure it out quickly." In the car, while explaining the equivalence of fractions, Ethan watched the girls in the rearview mirror. Their eyes, gestures, even the way they frowned in concentration, it all reflected little pieces of David. How had he not noticed before? The answer was simple. He had never thought to look for it. Guilt consumed him. Ever since David left, Ethan had buried himself in the family business, convinced his younger brother would eventually grow up and return. He had never really looked for him, never considered that David might need help, and now to discover that his brother had children, his nieces, who had spent months on the streets after their mother's death. It was unbearable. "Are you okay?" Lily's voice broke through Ethan's reverie. "You look weird." Ethan forced a smile. "I'm fine, just thinking about some grown-up stuff. Boring adult things," Emma quipped with a small grin. "Exactly," Ethan agreed, grateful for the light moment. "Really boring adult things." After dropping the girls off at school, Ethan drove aimlessly through the city, his mind in turmoil. Every corner seemed to trigger memories of David, the park where they played ball as kids, the movie theater where they first watched Star Wars together, the ice cream parlor where David, at 16, had his first job to their parents' dismay, who believed a haze shouldn't serve ice cream. Before he knew it, Ethan found himself parked in front of the Grand Oak Ridge Hotel. It wasn't planned, but suddenly he felt he needed to talk to someone who understood the situation. He needed to talk to Sarah. In the hotel restaurant, Sarah was restocking supplies for lunch when Amanda Torres, the HR manager, appeared looking surprised. "Miller, Mr. Hayes is here asking to speak with you." Sarah froze, a stack of napkins in her hands. "Me? Did something happen to the girls?" "He didn't say. He's waiting in the private lobby." Heart pounding, Sarah straightened her uniform and headed to the elegant lobby used for discreet meetings. Ethan was standing by the window, looking out at the snow. "Mr. Hayes, are the girls all right?" Ethan turned, looking relieved to see her. "They're fine, Sarah. And please, call me Ethan." She visibly relaxed, though his expression still concerned her. "So, what's going on?" "I needed to talk to someone," he said, gesturing for her to sit. "And you're the only person who knows the whole situation." Sarah hesitated. "I've got 20 minutes before lunch service starts." "I'll be brief," he promised, sitting across from her. Then, after a moment's hesitation, he told her everything. His confirmation about David, the preliminary investigation, the guilt he felt for not being there. Sarah listened intently, her face reflecting surprise as the details unfolded. "So you really confirm they are your nieces?" she finally said. "That's unbelievable. Fate has a peculiar sense of humor," Ethan replied with a sad smile. "Out of all the kids in all the towns in this country, it was my missing brother's daughters who walked into that diner that night. And now, what are you going to do?" Ethan sighed, running a hand through his hair in an anxious gesture. "I'm not entirely sure. Part of me wants to tell them right away. Another part fears it's too soon. They're just starting to feel secure. What if this revelation unsettles them?" Sarah leaned forward, hands clasped in her lap. "What does your gut tell you?" "My gut is at war with itself," Ethan confessed. "As a businessman, I'm trained to analyze risk, consider every variable before deciding. But this isn't a business. It's two kids who've already been through too much." "You care about them," Sarah observed. "That says a lot already." "Of course I care. They're my nieces. They're—" He hesitated, searching for the right word. "They're part of me in a way I never imagined possible." Sarah gave him a gentle smile. "Have you considered that maybe you're overthinking this? Maybe telling them the truth is exactly what they need. What if they hate me? What if they blame the family for their father's absence? Why would they? You didn't abandon anyone. On the contrary, you took them in without even knowing who they really were. Ethan mulled over her words, finding unexpected comfort in her simple logic. Want to know what I think? Sarah continued, seeing his thoughtful expression. I think the truth, even if difficult, is better than uncertainty. These girls have lived their whole lives with unanswered questions. You can give them at least some answers. You're right, Ethan admitted. They deserve to know. I just need to find the right moment. Sarah glanced at the clock. I have to get back to work, but call me if you need to talk more. And, Ethan, trust your gut. It served you three well so far. After Sarah left, Ethan remained seated in the lobby for a while, her words echoing in his mind. She was right. He was overthinking. The girls deserved to know the truth, and he needed the courage to tell them. The afternoon dragged on. Back in his home office, Ethan revisited old family albums, finding pictures of David as a teenager, at graduation, on summer vacations, frozen moments of a life that now felt like it belonged to someone else. He had always known the argument with their parents was the spark that led to David's departure, but he'd never fully understood the reasons. David never fit into the Hayes family's expectations. He didn't want to go into business. He preferred art and music. Their father called it a phase. Their mother called it rebelliousness. Ethan, caught up in his own world of spreadsheets and goals, never offered the support his younger brother needed. The last night they spent together before David left came back with painful clarity. They had been on the deck of the Cape Cod beach house, the same place in the photo with Claire. You don't understand, Ethan, David had said, gripping the wooden railing as he stared at the ocean. I don't want to spend my whole life living someone else's dream. It's the family legacy, Ethan retorted, with the arrogance of someone who had never questioned his place in the world. We built something that will last for generations. Hotels and resorts, David scoffed without humor. Places where rich people pretend they're having adventures, then go back to their empty lives. That's unfair and you know it. David turned to him, eyes shimmering in the moonlight. What's unfair is that nobody in this family sees me for who I am. They're all trying to shape me into something I'm not. And who are you exactly? The question came out harsher than Ethan intended. David only shook his head, disappointed. That's the problem, brother. You never cared enough to find out. The next morning, David was gone. No goodbyes, just a note. I need to find my own path. In the following years, sporadic contacts, postcards, brief emails, the occasional birthday call. Then, silence. And now, almost a decade later, Ethan discovered that his brother had not only found his path, but also built a family. A family that, for some inexplicable reason, had fallen apart, leaving two girls alone in the world. Until now, his office phone rang, disrupting his memories. Sir, Martin's voice came through. The girls are asking if they can go to a classmate's house on Saturday. It's their first invite. Ethan smiled, feeling a comforting warmth in his chest. The twins were adjusting, making friends. Of course they can. Get the details from them and we'll arrange it. After hanging up, Ethan turned his attention back to the window, noticing the snowfall was easing. A few rays of sun trying to break through the clouds. A fitting metaphor, he thought. After the storm, calm always follows. The sound of children laughing reached his ears. Approaching the window, he saw Emma and Lily in the backyard, trying to build a snowman. Dressed in new coats and boots, wearing colorful gloves and matching hats, they finally seemed like normal kids, having fun without worry. He watched for a few minutes, a decision crystallizing in his mind. He would tell them the truth. Not today, not while they laughed carelessly building a snowman, but soon, very soon. Picking up his phone, he dialed the number he had memorized over the past few weeks. Grand Oak Ridge Hotel, main restaurant. Sarah speaking. Sarah, it's Ethan. Sorry to bother you at work again. It's all right, she replied, concern evident in her voice. Is something wrong? No, not at all. I just wanted to thank you for today's advice. You were right. So you're going to tell them? Yes, he confirmed. Not today. I want to give them another day or two of simple peace. But soon, very soon. I think you're doing the right thing, Sarah said, her voice softening. They're stronger than you realize, Ethan. Stronger than anyone imagines. I know, he smiled, watching the girls now rolling in the snow, laughing uncontrollably. Stronger than anyone imagines. May I ask something? Sure. What happens afterward, when they find out you're their uncle? That they share your family by blood and not just by choice? Ethan didn't hesitate. Nothing changes. They're still mine. I'm responsible for them. The only difference is now I have an even stronger legal reason to formalize an adoption. Adoption? Sarah repeated in surprise. Yes. I was already considering it before finding out they were my nieces. Now it's crystal clear it's the right path. Outside, the girls had finished the snowman and were now placing an old scarf around its neck. Their faces were red from the cold but lit up with joy. I have to go, Sarah. The girls are in the yard and I want to join them. Go, she said, and he could hear the smile in her voice. They need you, and you need them. Ethan hung up, went downstairs and grabbed his coat from the closet. Before heading out to the garden, he glanced again at the photo of David and Claire he'd left on the hall console. I'll take care of them, brother, he promised silently, wherever you are. Outside, in the cold afternoon air, Emma and Lily greeted his arrival with well-aimed snowballs, laughter and shouts for him to help finish the snowman. In that moment, all of Ethan's doubts vanished. These were his girls now by blood and by choice, and nothing, not the past, nor the truth about their missing father, would change that. The revelation could wait a bit longer. Today, they were just a family enjoying a winter afternoon together. An unconventional, unexpected family, but a family nonetheless. The snow had stopped falling, leaving the city aglow under a silvery sheen. Ethan watched from his office window in the morning sun, each white surface reflecting like a mirror. Perhaps, he thought, it was a good omen, clarity after days of inner turmoil. On his desk lay the full report from Investigator Ramirez confirming everything. The twins' birth certificates listing David Hayes as their father, medical records from the 2016 car accident David had been in, the last known addresses for the couple before his brother's disappearance, and finally, Claire Bennett's death certificate, confirming she died of pneumonia complications just over a year ago. Cold documents revealing a warm human drama, the story of his brother and two girls who, by a twist of fate, had found their way back to the family. Ethan closed the folder and took a deep breath. He had made his decision. Today, he would tell the girls the truth. The day followed its usual routine. Breakfast with Emma and Lily, who now chatted about school and new friends with a readiness they hadn't shown weeks earlier. Then the driver took them to school while Ethan joined several video conferences in his office. At lunch, he called Sarah. I'm telling them today, he said as soon as she answered. Are you sure? Sarah asked, though her tone suggested she already knew the answer. Absolutely. I got the final report from the investigator. No more doubts, and they deserve to know. Do you want me to be there? Sarah offered. I could switch shifts. Ethan considered for a moment. Having Sarah present would comfort both him and the girls, but something told him this moment should be just the three of them. Thank you, but I think I need to do this alone, as family. Sarah was silent for a moment. I understand. You'll do fine, Ethan. Trust your instincts. Can I call you after, let you know how it went? Of course, she replied immediately. I'll be waiting. That afternoon, Ethan asked Chef Isabel to prepare a special dinner, the girls' favorite. Spaghetti and meatballs, plus chocolate ice cream for dessert. He wanted the evening to be pleasant, not tense. The driver picked the twins up from school at 4 dialed as usual. Ethan, who would normally be in meetings until late, cancelled all his appointments. He wanted to spend the afternoon with them, building a calm, normal atmosphere before the big talk. When the girls arrived, he surprised them by suggesting a board game in the living room near the lit fireplace. Don't you have work today? Emma asked, suspicious of his unusual level of attention on a weekday. Work can wait, Ethan replied with a smile. You're more important. The words came out naturally, unplanned, and Ethan realized with sudden clarity that they were the absolute truth. In just a few weeks, These children had become the center of his world. They played Monopoly, laughing when Lily managed to buy up all the expensive properties, and ate freshly baked cookies that Isabel had prepared just for afternoon snacks. The hours passed in a bubble of carefree familiarity that Ethan wished he could preserve forever. At exactly 7, Isabel announced that dinner was served. The chef had outdone herself, decorating the table with small lights and flowers as if she knew the evening was special. "Wow, it looks like a fancy restaurant," Emma remarked, marveling at the decor. "Like Sarah's restaurant," Lily added, helping herself to spaghetti. Ethan smiled, noticing how the waitress had become a reference point for the girls. Sarah, with her natural kindness and straightforward honesty, had earned their trust in a way few adults could. During dinner, they kept the conversation light. The twins talked about the science project they were working on at school, something about the water cycle, and Ethan shared funny stories from his own school days. "Were you well behaved in school?" Lily asked, her curious eyes on him as she savored a meatball. "Most of the time," Ethan replied, "but my brother, he was the family rebel." It was the first time he mentioned David so openly, and he felt a small pang in his chest. The girls seemed to catch something in his expression. "So you have a brother?" Emma asked, leaning forward with interest. Ethan realized the moment had arrived naturally, unplanned. Perhaps that was best. "I did, or I do. It's complicated," he replied, setting his fork down. "Actually, there's something important I need to tell both of you." The girls exchanged looks, that silent communication they always used in important moments. Lily set down her fork too, as if sensing they needed to pay full attention. "Is it something bad?" Emma asked, caution creeping back into her eyes. "No, it's not bad," Ethan hastened to say. "It's just unexpected and important." He took a deep breath, organizing his thoughts. How to explain something so complex to 9-year-olds? He decided a direct approach was best. "Remember that photograph you showed me? The man with your mother?" They both nodded. "That man," Ethan continued, his voice softer now, "is my brother, David." A profound silence fell over the table. The girls stared at him with wide eyes, processing the information. "Your brother?" Emma finally whispered. "Yes." "My younger brother," Ethan confirmed, keeping his voice calm despite his racing heart. "Which means I am your uncle." Lily let out a small gasp, her hand instinctively reaching for Emma's. "Uncle," she repeated, as if testing the word. "Yes, you're my nieces," Ethan continued. "Family." "My family?" Emma frowned, clearly trying to fit this revelation into her understanding of the world. "How do you know? Are you sure?" "I'm sure," Ethan answered, admiring her perceptiveness. "I hired an investigator to confirm it. There are records, birth certificates, documents. There's no doubt." "Why didn't we meet before?" Lily asked, her voice small and confused. "Where were you when Mom got sick? When we had to leave our home?" The question struck Ethan like a physical blow. It was the same question he'd asked himself countless times in the past few days. "I didn't know," he answered honestly. "I had no idea you existed. David, your father, and I lost contact years ago. He never told me about you." "Why?" Emma pressed, a note of hurt in her voice. "Did you fight?" Ethan carefully considered how to reply. The girls deserved the truth, but he didn't want to speak ill of his brother, their father, especially when David wasn't there to defend himself. "We had our differences," he explained gently. "Your dad wanted to find his own path, away from our family's expectations. He was always more independent, more adventurous than I was." "What was he like?" Lily asked, her eyes suddenly bright with interest. "Besides the photo?" The question took Ethan by surprise. Amid the confusion of the revelation, Lily was seeking to know her father, the man she'd never truly known. "He was brilliant," Ethan began, letting the memories flow. "Creative. He played guitar and sang really well. He loved traveling, exploring new places. He had a smile that lit up the room, just like yours." The girls listened with absolute focus, absorbing every word like a treasure. "Where is he now?" Emma asked, the question Ethan dreaded most. "We don't know for sure," he replied honestly. "There was a car accident when you were very little. After that, We lost track of him. Is he dead? Lily asked bluntly, making Ethan swallow hard. We haven't found any evidence of that, he answered carefully. But we don't know where he is either. We're looking for him. A hush fell over the table as the girls processed all of this. Ethan waited patiently, letting them absorb at their own pace. So you're really our uncle, Emma finally said, more as a statement than a question. Is that why you brought us here, because you found out who we were? No, Ethan answered immediately. When I found you at the diner, I had no idea. I brought you here because I cared. I only discovered we were family when I saw the picture. A small smile appeared on Lily's face. So you chose us, even before you knew we were related. The observation, so simple yet profound, deeply touched Ethan. Yes, he confirmed. I chose you. What now? Emma asked, a question loaded with unspoken meanings. What would happen to them now? Where would they go? Who would care for them? Ethan stood and walked around the table, kneeling between the girls' chairs. He looked each one in the eye, wanting them to fully understand his next words. Now we're a family, he said, taking one girl's hand in each of his. You're my nieces, I'm your uncle, and I promise that as long as I live, you'll never be alone again. This is your home. I am your home. Forever. Emma's eyes filled with tears, but she held them back, always the stronger one. Lily, however, let hers flow freely. Do you really promise? Lily whispered. I promise, Ethan replied, feeling tears sting his own eyes. With all my heart. Without warning, Lily threw her arms around his neck, hugging him tightly. After a moment's hesitation, Emma did the same. Ethan embraced them both, feeling the weight of the world lift from his shoulders. No matter how long it took, or what obstacles they would face, they would do it together. As a family. Later that night, after the girls went to bed, not without asking dozens of questions about David, the Hayes family, and the future, Ethan sat on the porch with a glass of whiskey, contemplating the stars in the clear sky after the snowfall. He picked up his phone and dialed Sarah's number. How did it go? She asked immediately upon answering. Better than I expected, Ethan replied, a smile in his voice. They're incredible, Sarah. So strong, so resilient. Tell me how they reacted. Surprise, confusion, some tears, lots of questions about David, but in the end, acceptance. Even relief, I think. Relief? I think knowing they have family, that they belong somewhere, to someone, brought them a security they desperately needed. Sarah was silent for a moment. I'm happy for all of you, Ethan. Thank you for your support, he said sincerely. For listening, for advising me. I'm not sure I could have done it without you. You could, she replied confidently. You're stronger than you think. They talked for a few more minutes before hanging up. Ethan stayed on the porch, watching the distant city lights. For the first time in years, maybe the first time in his adult life, he felt fully present, fully connected. In the days that followed, the atmosphere in Ethan's home shifted subtly yet profoundly. Now that the twins knew he was truly their uncle, they felt more comfortable asking questions, sharing opinions, even occasionally disagreeing. The pretense of being perfect, grateful children, out of fear of being sent away, began to crumble, revealing their true personalities. Emma, Ethan discovered, had a stubborn streak reminiscent of his brother, argumentative, inquisitive, always seeking to understand why things worked as they did. Lily, more introspective, revealed a surprising talent for drawing and a photographic memory that made her exceptionally good at history and geography. One afternoon, arriving home earlier than usual, Ethan found Martin, his ever-proper butler, sitting on the living room floor, helping the girls assemble a giant puzzle. Sir, Martin said, getting to his feet quickly and adjusting his suit, a slight blush on his cheeks. We weren't expecting you so soon. Clearly, Ethan replied with a grin. Please, continue. It looks like you were having fun. Uncle Martin is showing us pictures of England when we're done, Lily said happily, using the word uncle for the first time, not for Ethan, but for the butler, who looked equally surprised and touched by the honorary title. The house, once a spotless but cold space, now showed signs of children's presence. Lily's drawings appeared on the refrigerator, held up by colourful magnets. Adventure books Emma devoured were scattered around the living room. The mornings were no longer silent, but filled with laughter and lively conversation over breakfast. Ethan, for his part, found himself changing as well. Meetings that used to stretch into the night now ended promptly at 5 so he could have dinner with the girls. Weekends, once reserved for golf with business partners or work trips, now included park outings, zoo visits, or home movie nights with popcorn. "You seem different," noted Robert Chen, his CFO and longtime friend, after a board meeting. "More relaxed." "I've been sleeping better," Ethan replied with a small smile. The truth ran deeper. For the first time in his adult life, Ethan felt he was doing something genuinely meaningful, not building hotels or amassing profits, but building a family, creating a home. Sarah remained a regular presence, though from a distance. She frequently called to talk with the girls, and they called her back and sharing daily details. Occasionally, Ethan invited her for dinner, and on those evenings, watching her interact with Emma and Lily, he felt a sense of completion he had never before experienced. One night, while Ethan worked in his office, he heard a soft knock at the door. It was Emma in pajamas, looking hesitant. "Can I come in?" "Sure," he replied, closing his laptop. "Can't sleep." She entered and sat in the armchair opposite his desk, moving with a deliberate seriousness that made her seem oddly grown up. "I wanted to ask you something," she said, her fingers nervously playing with the hem of her pajamas. "It's about the future." "What about the future?" "Are we staying here? With you? Forever?" The question hit Ethan in his core. Even after the revelation and his promises, there was still an underlying insecurity, the fear of losing everything once again. "Yes," he answered without hesitation. "This is your home now, our home. Even when we grow up." "Even if we're difficult?" she asked. Ethan stood and walked around his desk, kneeling so he was at her eye level. "Emma, you and Lily are my family, the only family I have. Nothing, absolutely nothing, will change that, no matter what happens." She studied him for a moment, as if assessing the sincerity of his words. "Uncle Ethan," she finally said, testing the title for the first time. "Thank you." "For what?" he asked, deeply moved by how she addressed him. "For finding us," she said simply, before leaning in and planting a quick kiss on his cheek. She then stood up and left the office, leaving Ethan overwhelmed and speechless. Uncle Ethan. Two simple words carrying an entire universe of meaning. Two words that signified belonging, connection, family. Two words he realized he had been waiting his entire life to hear. That night, before going to bed, Ethan quietly entered the twins' room, as had become his habit. Lily was fast asleep, hugging her worn teddy bear. Emma, always the last to drift off, opened her eyes sleepily when he adjusted her blanket. "Good night, Uncle Ethan," she murmured, before falling back into slumber. "Good night, nieces," he whispered in the darkness, feeling finally complete. Ethan's office on the top floor of Hayes Tower had changed in recent weeks. Among the architectural plans for new hotels and financial reports, there were now framed photos. Emma and Lily at the park, the three of them at the beach on a sunny weekend, the girls with their first school science trophies. One cold January morning, Ethan stared at the city through his panoramic window, a cup of coffee forgotten in his hand. His mind wasn't on the 4 new developments under construction or the season's occupancy rates, but on the stories Emma and Lily had told him the night before about kids at school who didn't have proper winter coats, about a classmate living in a temporary shelter with her mother. "Sir?" Angela, his assistant, broke his thoughts. "The financial advisors are waiting in the conference room." Ethan nodded, taking a sip of the now cold coffee. "Tell them I'll be there in 5. And, Angela, please add another item to the agenda. I want to discuss setting up a foundation." The meeting lasted 3 hours. When it ended, the advisors left with expressions ranging from perplexed to enthusiastic. Ethan had presented his plan. Allocate 15% of Hayes Hospitality Group's annual profits to a new foundation focused on vulnerable children, providing housing, education, and opportunities for those the system failed to protect. "That's a considerable investment," Robert Chen, his CFO, remarked, remaining in the room after the others left. "Shareholders will question it." Let them, Ethan replied calmly. It's not just charity, Robert. It's our responsibility. We build luxury hotels while kids sleep on the streets. It's time to balance that scale. In the Grand Oak Ridge restaurant, Sarah was finishing her shift when she received Ethan's message. I need your opinion on something important. Free for coffee. An hour later, seated in a discreet downtown cafe, Ethan explained his plan to Sarah, his eyes shining with a passion she had never seen in him before. I want to make a real difference, he concluded. Like what happened with Emma and Lily, but on a bigger scale for all those kids who aren't lucky enough to be found by someone. Sarah smiled, warming her hands around her teacup. I think it's extraordinary, Ethan. Truly extraordinary. Do you think it's feasible? I'm not naive. I know I can't save every child. But if we can help some, even if you help just one child, it'll have been worth it, Sarah replied, recalling the night she risked her job to feed 2 hungry little girls. But I think you can help many more than you realize. The following week, Ethan met with social workers, shelter directors, and child development specialists. He took notes on every piece of advice, every warning, every suggestion. The Hayes Foundation, as he decided to name it, would not just be his name on a building. It would make a real change in real children's lives. You're different, Sarah commented during a Sunday visit to Ethan's house. The girls were playing in the yard, soaking in the weak winter sunshine. Lighter, Ethan reflected on her observation. You know what I realized? I spent years building something to leave as a legacy, hotels, properties, a brand. Now I see the real legacy is in the lives we touch. Sarah nodded, watching Emma demonstrate how to throw a ball to Lily. They're proud of you. They can't stop talking about Uncle Ethan's special project to help kids like we used to be. By spring, the Hayes Foundation had launched its first project, refurbishing a children's shelter downtown. It wasn't a grand event with ribbon cutting and press coverage, just Ethan, the twins, Sarah, and the kids who would now have a safe, welcoming place to call home, at least temporarily. As he watched Emma and Lily show the newly stocked library to the shelter's children, Ethan felt a certainty he had never experienced in all his years of business success. He had finally found his true purpose. Reputation is like crystal, hard to build, easy to shatter, and impossible to fully repair. Mr. Coleman learned this the hard way. In the weeks following the incident with Sarah and the twins, the Magnolia Diner began experiencing something it had never faced before. Empty tables. What started as disapproving murmurs from a few customers who witnessed that scene soon spread through the small community. Stories of how the owner had fired a longtime employee for feeding hungry children circulated in local social media groups. 3 months later, the neon sign of the Magnolia Diner was switched off for the last time. A paper on the door simply announced, "Permanently closed. Thank you for the years of support." While the Magnolia faded, the restaurant Le Ciel at the Grand Oak Ridge Hotel flourished under Sarah's dedication. Her transition from the simplicity of a diner to the sophistication of a 5-star restaurant wasn't easy, but she tackled every challenge with the same determination that defined her. It's all about attention to detail, she patiently explained to the new waitresses she trained. Every customer deserves to feel special, whether they order just a coffee or a full dinner with wine pairing. Amanda Torres, the HR manager who hired Sarah at Ethan's recommendation, watched her progress with satisfaction. She has something rare, Amanda commented to the executive chef. It's not just experience or skill, it's an authenticity customers feel immediately. 8 months after starting at Le Ciel, Sarah was called to Amanda's office one quiet afternoon. Close the door, please, Amanda said as Sarah walked in. I have a proposal for you. Sarah sat down, trying not to show her nerves. In her experience, closed-door meetings rarely brought good news. Gerard is retiring, Amanda announced, referring to the current restaurant manager, and your name was the first, actually the only one that came up as a natural replacement. Sarah blinked several times, processing this. You're offering me the position of manager at Le Ciel. Amanda smiled. I am. The salary is nearly double your current earnings, plus additional benefits. It's a big responsibility, but frankly, you're already doing half the job without the title. That evening, Sarah called Ethan to share the news. That's wonderful, he exclaimed. Absolutely deserved. Thank you, Sarah replied, still absorbing the reality of her new position. It feels surreal. Less than a year ago, I was pouring coffee at the Magnolia, worried about paying the rent. Life has its twists and turns, Ethan said, and she could hear the smile in his voice. The girls will be thrilled. They still say you make the best hot chocolate in the world. 2 more months passed. Sarah adapted quickly to her new role as manager of Le Ciel. Her leadership style, firm but fair, demanding but understanding, earned her team's respect. Reservations surged, online reviews skyrocketed, and the restaurant was nominated for a Regional Excellence Award. One autumn afternoon, as Sarah reviewed the dinner reservation list, Gabriella, now the head maitre d', approached with a puzzled expression. "There's a man in the lobby asking to speak with you," she said quietly. "He looks nervous, says it's a personal matter." Sarah frowned. "Did he give his name?" "Coleman. Frank Coleman." The name sank in Sarah's stomach like a stone. For a moment, she considered asking Gabriella to send him away. What could Frank Coleman possibly want after all this time? "I'll see him," she decided finally. "In my office, please." When the door opened, Sarah almost didn't recognize the man who entered. Frank Coleman had lost weight. His once imposing shoulders slumped slightly. The thick mustache that was his trademark was trimmed, and his eyes, once domineering, now avoided direct contact. "Ms. Miller," he said, his voice strangely hesitant. "Thank you for seeing me." "Mr. Coleman," Sarah replied neutrally, indicating the chair in front of her desk. "How can I help you?" He sat, his hands restless in his lap. "First, let me congratulate you on your new position. I hear Le Ciel is doing better than ever under your management." Sarah nodded, waiting for him to get to the point. "I'm sure you know Magnolia closed," he went on, clearing his throat uncomfortably. "I heard, yes." Coleman took a deep breath. "After you left, things were never the same. Customers started dwindling. I tried various promotions, changed the menu, but nothing worked. The reputation, well, the community has a long memory." Sarah looked at the man before her, a shadow of the arrogant businessman who'd fired her without hesitation that winter night. "I'm sorry about your diner," she said sincerely. "I know how much work you put into it over the years." He raised his eyes, surprised by her unexpected kindness. "Thank you, but I'm not here for sympathy. I'm here because—" He swallowed hard. "I need a job, Ms. Miller. Anything. Waiter, kitchen help, cleaning. I can't afford to be picky." The silence that followed was heavy. Sarah studied the man across from her, seeking any sign of deceit or manipulation. She found none, only genuine defeat and, surprisingly, regret. "Why here?" she finally asked. "Why come to me, of all people?" Coleman looked at his own hands, then met her gaze. "Because I owe you more than an apology. I was cruel and unfair. What you did for those girls, it was right. I was wrong." He paused. "And maybe if anyone understands the value of a second chance, it's you." His words hit Sarah deeply. A memory flashed, her 17-year-old self, begging for a chance in a restaurant kitchen after running away from home. The older woman who had given her that break changed her life forever. "I can't promise anything," Sarah said after a long pause. "But we have an opening for a barback. The pay is modest, the hours are long, and you'll report to someone 15 years younger than you." Coleman nodded quickly. "I'll take whatever you offer, Miss Miller." "I expect absolute punctuality, respect for every member of the team, and a willingness to learn," Sarah continued, her voice firm. "At the first complaint of inappropriate behavior, our arrangement ends. Understood?" "Perfectly," he replied, a glimmer of hope shining in his tired eyes. "Start tomorrow at 4. Talk to Miguel at the bar. He knows you're coming." When Coleman left, Sarah remained in her office, contemplating fate's strange turns. Less than a year ago, this man had humiliated and fired her. Today, she was deciding his future. It wasn't about revenge or superiority. It was about recognizing that everyone deserves the chance to start over, to reinvent themselves, just as she had done, just as Ethan was doing with his foundation, just as Emma and Lily were doing in their new home. That night, arriving home, Sarah found a small package at her door, a book on restaurant management with a note from Ethan and the girls. Inside, A simple message. To celebrate your promotion. You inspire us every day. Sarah smiled, clutching the book to her chest. Life truly had mysterious ways, from a simple waitress to the manager of one of the best restaurants in town, from a single act of kindness to an unlikely family, from an unjust firing to a position of authority she would use not to punish, but to uplift. Some might call it luck, others, poetic justice. Sarah preferred to think of it as life offering new opportunities for everyone, including those who had erred in the past but were willing to do better in the future. Spring arrived in a burst of color and scent. The gardens of Ethan's mansion, once formal and meticulously arranged, now showcased wildflower patches chosen by the girls, a small vegetable bed Lily tended diligently, and even a treehouse Ethan had hired someone to build, fulfilling a childhood dream for the twins. It was Sunday, and Sarah drove with the windows down, letting the fresh morning air fill the car. The past month at Le Ciel had been hectic, corporate events and a visit from an important food critic. She finally had a day off and decided to accept Ethan's invitation for lunch. As she turned into the driveway, she smiled at the sight of colorful bikes leaning against a tree. Just 6 months ago, Emma and Lily barely had adequate clothing, let alone bikes or toys. The transformation was remarkable. Before she could even knock, the door swung open to reveal Emma in a kitchen apron, flour on her face. "Sarah!" the girl exclaimed, giving her an enthusiastic hug. "We're making pizza!" "You arrived just in time." Sarah returned the hug, noticing Emma had grown a few inches since she last saw them a few weeks ago. "Homemade pizza. I'm impressed." "It was Uncle Ethan's idea," Emma explained, pulling her inside. "He said the best meals are the ones we cook together." In the mansion's spacious kitchen, an unlikely scene was unfolding. Ethan Hayes, CEO of one of the country's largest hotel chains, wore a chef's apron and taught Lily how to stretch pizza dough. The table was filled with fresh tomatoes, basil, various cheeses, and an array of toppings. "Sarah!" Lily ran toward her, leaving a trail of flour behind. "You have to see my report card. I got an A in math, and she won the spelling bee," Ethan added proudly. "Welcome, Sarah. Hope you're hungry." Sarah looked around, absorbing the warm atmosphere that permeated the room. The kitchen, once a sterile space rarely used, now showed clear signs of daily life. Drawings taped to the fridge, plants in the windows, and a collection of colorful magnets from places they had visited together. "I never thought I'd see the day Ethan Hayes made homemade pizza," Sarah joked, washing her hands in the sink. Ethan grinned. "I discovered I have a hidden culinary talent." He burned the first 2 attempts, Lily confided, prompting peals of laughter. Lunch was noisy and cheerful. The pizzas, though irregularly shaped and topped with unusual combinations, Lily insisted on adding marshmallows, turned out surprisingly tasty. The girls shared stories from school, interrupting and completing each other's sentences, as twins often do. Sarah watched their dynamic with amazement at the natural closeness they had developed. Ethan, once so formal and reserved, now laughed freely, participating in the girls' banter and adding details to their stories. After the meal, the twins begged permission to show Sarah the treehouse. As they headed outside through the garden, Sarah noticed Ethan walking alongside her. "They're unrecognizable," she commented, watching the girls run ahead, so happy, so childlike. Ethan nodded, his gaze following his nieces with an expression of contentment. "Sometimes it's hard to believe these are the same frightened girls from that night at the diner. You've done an amazing job, Ethan." He shook his head. "We have. I'll never forget it all started with you, Sarah. Your courage and kindness changed everything." Sarah felt warmth rise to her cheeks, uneasy with the praise. "I did what any decent person would do, but not everyone would," Ethan countered. "The truth is, many would have looked the other way. You didn't hesitate to risk your livelihood for 2 children you didn't know." The treehouse was impressive, a solid, safe structure with real windows, a small balcony, and even a pulley system for lifting baskets. "You can come up," Emma called from above. "It's super sturdy." Sarah and Ethan climbed the well-built ladder, discovering a surprisingly spacious and comfortable interior. The girls had decorated it with cushions, books, drawings, and small treasures, shells, colorful stones, origami creations. "This is our secret place," Lily explained, showing them a journal for visitors to sign. "But you can come any time you like, Sarah." "It's an honor," Sarah replied, signing the visitor's book with mock solemnity. As the girls proudly showed every detail of their hideout, Sarah noticed a framed photograph hanging on the wall, the same one that had revealed the connection between Ethan and the twins, David and Claire, smiling, frozen in that moment of happiness. "Uncle Ethan had a copy made for us," Emma said, following Sarah's gaze. "So we remember we've always been loved." The profound simplicity of that statement struck Sarah. These girls, who had lost everything, now understood they had never lost the most important thing, the love their parents had for them, however brief it was. Later, while the twins continued to play in the garden, Sarah and Ethan sat on the terrace, watching from a distance. "I have news," Ethan said, pouring iced tea into tall glasses. "The adoption process was officially completed yesterday." Sarah turned to him, surprised. "Already? I thought it would take longer." "It usually does," he agreed. "But with good attorneys, the blood relationship, and the fact that the girls have no other relatives, it went faster than expected." "So it's official," Sarah smiled. "You're legally their father now." "Father," Ethan repeated the word, as if testing its weight. "We're still getting used to uncle. I guess Dad will come naturally if they want it." "They love you, Ethan. The title is just a detail." He nodded thoughtfully. "I haven't told them about the adoption yet. I want to do something special to mark the occasion." "What do you have in mind?" "I was thinking of a trip. Maybe Cape Cod, where their parents first met." He hesitated. "I'd like you to come with us, Sarah." The invitation caught her off guard. "Me? But it's a family moment." "You are family," Ethan interrupted firmly. "To the girls and to me, too." Something in his tone made Sarah look more closely at him. Over the past months, their relationship had evolved beyond the circumstances that first brought them together. Occasional lunches, frequent phone calls, texts about the girls' progress or work. A genuine friendship had blossomed, and perhaps something more. "I'd love to go," she finally replied. Cape Cod's beach was almost deserted on that May morning. The tourist season had not yet begun in earnest. Ethan spread out a large towel on the sand while the girls raced along the shoreline, collecting shells and chasing gulls. Sarah helped unpack their picnic lunch, noticing how the sea breeze ruffled Ethan's usually impeccable hair. There was something different about him here, more relaxed, less the executive and more simply a man enjoying a day at the beach with his family. "This is where that photo was taken," Ethan explained, pointing to a particular stretch of shore. "David and I used to come here since we were kids. Our parents had a summer house not far away." The girls returned, damp and smiling, carrying a bucket filled with marine treasures. "Girls," Ethan called, sitting on the towel, "I have something important to tell you." Emma and Lily sat immediately, their faces attentive. After months of instability, they'd developed a knack for recognizing significant moments. "It's good news," Ethan assured, seeing the brief worry cross Emma's face. "Really good news, actually." He removed an envelope from his shirt pocket and handed it to the twins. Together, they opened it and pulled out the official documents, their brows furrowed as they tried to decipher the legal language. "What is it?" Lily finally asked. "It's the adoption papers," Ethan explained gently. "They were finalized this week. Officially, legally, you are my daughters now. If you want to be," he added hurriedly. The twins looked from the papers to each other, then to Ethan. For a terrible moment, he feared he'd made a mistake. Maybe it was too soon, or they didn't want this formality. "Does that mean we can call you Dad?" Lily asked, her voice small and hopeful. The lump in Ethan's throat prevented him from speaking immediately. He just nodded. "And nobody can separate us. Ever?" Emma pressed, always the practical one. "Never," Ethan confirmed. "We're a family now. Forever." The girls threw themselves at him at the same time, hugging him tightly. Sarah, watching the scene, felt her own eyes fill with tears. Who could have imagined, on that cold night at the Magnolia Diner, that this chance meeting would lead to something so deep and permanent. "Is Sarah part of our family too?" Lily asked, turning to include her in the embrace. "Of course she is," Ethan replied, extending an arm to Sarah. In a very special way, Sarah joined the group hug, feeling the unique connection that had formed among them. It wasn't a conventional family, but it was real and strong. Later, while the girls built a sandcastle at the water's edge, Ethan and Sarah strolled slowly along the beach. "Do you think David would be pleased?" Ethan asked suddenly. "With the way I'm raising his daughters," Sarah took a moment to consider. "I think he'd be deeply grateful. They're loved, safe, happy. What more could a father want for his kids?" Ethan nodded, gazing at the horizon. "We're still looking for him. Ramirez has new leads, but," he shrugged, "whatever happens, the girls will be all right. Thanks to you." "Thanks to us," he corrected, gently taking her hand. "This family we've built, unconventional, unexpected, but perfect in its own way, is the result of many small acts of courage. Your decision to feed 2 hungry children, my decision to step in. Our shared decision not to look away when fate placed these girls in our path." Sarah smiled, giving his hand a light squeeze. "I like to think some things are just meant to happen." In the distance, Emma called out, "Dad, Sarah, come see our castle." It was the first time Emma had called him Dad. The pure, genuine joy that lit up Ethan's face made Sarah's heart swell. "We're coming," Ethan replied, his voice trembling with emotion. Together, they walked toward the girls, leaving parallel footprints in the damp sand, temporary marks the tide would soon wash away, yet a perfect symbol of the journey they had shared. Side by side, forging a path together, one step at a time. The sandcastle was impressive. Tall turrets, a carefully dug moat, and even little flags made from sticks and seaweed. "This is our new home," Lily explained seriously. "Everyone has their own room, and there's a special space for when Sarah visits." "It's beautiful," Sarah said, kneeling to admire the details. "Will we ever build a real one someday?" Emma asked, looking at Ethan with those eyes so reminiscent of his brother. "Maybe not a castle," Ethan replied, smiling, "but we can build any home we want, together." That late afternoon, as the sun began its descent toward the horizon, the 4 of them sat on the sand watching the waves. The girls leaned against Ethan, Sarah beside him, their hands occasionally brushing, comfortable in a shared silence. Sarah thought about how her life had changed since that night at the Magnolia Diner, from an insecure waitress to a respected manager. From a lonely woman to part of something larger and more meaningful. Ethan reflected on the journey that brought him here. From a man focused solely on business and material success to someone who found purpose and meaning in the most important relationships, his daughters and the woman by his side, whose single act of kindness had set everything in motion. Emma and Lily, secure in their new father's embrace, no longer needed to carry their small backpacks as their only link to the past. Now they could look to the future with confidence and hope, knowing they would never be alone again. The sun touched the horizon, turning the ocean into a mirror of liquid gold. Another day ended, but for this unlikely family, brought together not by fate or blood alone, but by conscious choices of love and commitment, it was only the beginning. Because the strongest bonds are not necessarily the ones we're born with, but those we choose to forge and nurture. Bonds of love, respect, and dedication. Unbreakable bonds that withstand life's storms and emerge stronger, brighter, and more genuine. Bonds that, like the setting sun destined to rise again tomorrow, promise that there is always hope, always a chance for a new beginning, always room for love, no matter how unlikely the path that leads us there. The story of Ethan and the twins is a powerful reminder that empathy and altruism can transform lives. For Ethan, a man who always lived in the business world, it was a reunion with his own humanity. For Sarah, it was a new beginning, even if down a different path. And for the girls, it was the promise of a future filled with love and security. Together, they proved that the bonds we choose can be as strong as those of blood, and that true love always finds a way.